Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to our first show of the year, Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. My name is
Hurrah!
VashSky, your host,
Huzzah!
and here, the amazing, the one, the only Lou Wasserman's Ghost. What's going on?
Oh, the usual ghostly appendages and assortment of events. For those who noticed, I took a couple weeks off to kind of rest and recoup, and I'm feeling reinvigorated and ready, you say, to put on the show.
To put on this show. I love it. I love it. Well, you know who's not ready to put on the show? It's me, because apparently Windows was like, hey, you know what? You're going to get an update, whether you like it or not. And so now I'm forced to use my secondary machine here. So very much apologize without the visuals, but I will try to
We'll make word pictures fill in as best they can.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm gonna try to anyway. And yes, Juliet, I know. Memberships are coming. Don't worry, they are coming. I am working
soon to
currently,
a theater or drive-in near you.
Absolutely, I'm working to get those all set up there. And yes, I know you've been inquiring about a wrench, so I'm working on that as well. But before we get into the main show, we have already people supporting our amazing efforts here on YouTube.
Oh.
Samuel May with a $3 with the super sticker. Thank you so much for that. Let me see if I can get the super sticker up and see if I can see what it is. Oh, it's a guy with a thumbs up sign. Thank you. Very much so. Yeah. Yes, Tom F. You were exactly right. Windows 11. That's. Oh boy.
Every time I hear that, I want to sing it to the tune of Windows 11.
Yeah, exactly. It's
because ain't that a kick in the head, as Dean might have said.
It's such a kick in the head. But I think you wanted to start off things, Lou, with
I have a little personal anecdote I'd like to share with everybody because it amplifies and points out something to me anyway, and maybe to you, about our theme song here on these channels, about how culture, movies and TV and books and stuff like that, affects the rest of the world. I happen to like home reno and home building shows, and there is one that started in England that now has offshoots in New Zealand and in Australia that I love. And I was watching the Australian one 2 days ago, and they were building a house at the extreme southern tip of Tasmania on a little island out there on a sand dune where the winds and the storms are enormously powerful. And so they went to a glass company that made special laminated, super strong glass, okay? And they're talking about how strong it is. And the guy who's the glass maker says, yeah, as strong as Fort Knox. And the host agrees, yeah, as strong as Fort Knox. And I sat there thinking, wait a minute. Here's two guys in Australia making glass using that comparison. Question, do you think they would if it wasn't for Goldfinger?
Right.
If it wasn't, because even Americans mostly didn't know what the hell Fort Knox was, even if you lived in Kentucky, until that movie, which was shot in England, and that's not the real Fort Knox in the movie, and the inside is a total imagination from Ken Adam. But that symbol through England, through Hollywood, became a symbol of impregnability to two guys building a house in Australia. And it just goes to show you, I think, how these images, these words, these phrases, these ideas in our culture permeate into our day-to-day life. In another sense, in reverse, a lot of these shows from England, where they talk about a house that feels bigger inside than it looks on the outside, they call it a TARDIS house, after Doctor Who.
Wow.
And I happen to have a cardiac CAT scan on Friday. And I was watching videos of them to see what it was all about, which I sort of knew. And I watched a video of a doctor from England, and he said, when you get in there and the thing starts spinning around, it'll remind you of the TARDIS. And sure enough, it sounds like the TARDIS. But it's like we make these comparisons to totally fictional events that we've experienced only through cinema and through TV and through music. And they get into our real life. So there you go. Anyway, enough philosophy. I just thought I'd share that because I think it's fascinating. Oh, I have another fascinating one too.
Please.
I was telling you that I just read Al Pacino's autobiography called Sonny Boy, and I highly recommend it to you all. If you are not particularly well versed in New York theater, There's a part in the middle where you won't recognize a lot of the people's names, but that's okay. It's still really good. But it starts with his childhood in poverty in the Bronx. Um, and his father left his mother when he was 3 years old. So he didn't really know him until much later in life when he finally reunited with him and with his father's family. It turns out his grandfather on his father's side emigrated to America from Sicily and came from a little town in Sicily called, are you ready? Corleone. How's that for a coincidence? This is years after The Godfather that he found this out.
Right.
And I thought, wow, how's that for life and art doing their little dance? But he's actually inherited to Corleone. Go figure. And it turns out Corleone was not so much famous for mobsters as it was for plasterers. And his grandfather was a master plasterer. So there you have it. But the book is really, really, really great. And he definitely wrote it in the sense that I don't know whether he spoke to a interviewer and they put it down or he got out a pen and paper or whatever, but it's certainly his voice and his recollections of his life. And well worth reading if you're into that kind of thing. Anyway, having said all of that, where are we going, boss?
Well, a couple things here. I believe this is the cover of the book.
Yeah, that's it.
It's about a little less than $20 on Amazon. Definitely check that out right there. You know, you brought up Goldfinger and you brought up Fort Knox. It's so funny because I remember there's like one of the distinct memories I have of a kid of watching Die Hard with a Vengeance, and that movie came out in 1995, more than 30 years later after Goldfinger, and yet they were still comparing the gold found at the Federal Reserve with Fort Knox. It's in terms of like impacts on the culture, it can't be understated for sure.
And that gold in New York that they go after is actually the gold of other countries being held for them by us. And it goes back to basically just before World War II when a lot of them shipped it here to get it out of the way of the Nazis. So, I'm not supposed to mention those guys. You know, the Teutonic totalitarian types. Anyway.
Yes, indeed. Very, very cool. Awesome. I love that movie very, very much. So that's some cool stuff right there. But I kind of wanted to, before getting things completely kicked off on the show, there's something I wanted to talk about as well, because you have experience with this, Lou, and it's I don't know. It's a little rare that I ask you a question, when you're answering questions, but it's, I don't know. It's something that I have a curiosity about, which is because this is the first show of the year, because it's the new year, there was a place back in the day on Disney property where you could celebrate New Year's every single night, and that was Pleasure Island. And I think you experienced it. I never did.
Many, many times. I used to always, my favorite place there was the Adventurers Club. But when it got close to New Year's, all of those clubs shied everybody out into the street because they had a big, massive fireworks and confetti. And, well, you can see it there at Pleasure Island every night at midnight. Now, what? Do they even stay open till midnight anywhere at Disney? I don't know. But it was a lot of fun. It was New Year's Eve every night of the year.
Oh, that would have been so cool to experience that. And that whole thing is in ads and stuff, too, and commercials at the time, which is really fun to see. Midnight every night. Very, very cool. Unfortunately, this New Year's Day, maybe not as celebratory as others in the past, but there was a time when it was New Year's every single night, which is pretty cool. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Good. And we should probably restate the policy so you all understand. I will answer pretty much anything about how the biz works, as long as it doesn't betray personal confidences or things that I have to sort of keep to myself. And so asking me about specific people I may have worked with and all that is probably going to get you a maybe or a not. But other than that, feel free, and I'll do whatever I can to enlighten you as to how things really work, as opposed to how all of the various online people who know diddly or are in the pay of the various powers that be would like you to think they work, because it ain't necessarily the same thing. Having said that, go for it.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's see here. We have a couple of questions from KG. Here we go. What are the origins of agents and managers in Hollywood? Are they uniquely Hollywood concepts, or do they derive from theater and make their way over to the movie business?
Oh, sure, it started in theater because remember in the days of vaudeville, for example, that there were these massive chains of theaters all across the country, and so you needed one person to make your deal with them to appear so many weeks in so many theaters across so many, book out your itinerary with the company and negotiate the deal. So sure, and now managers and agents are slightly different things, but basically it's the same idea. We could go into all those differences, but if that's interesting to people, but yeah, it definitely started in the theater because everybody was, they were free agents, they were individuals, and so they needed somebody. Because let us face it, people who are creative in their performances or their writing or whatever are not necessarily good business people. That doesn't mean all agents and managers are good business people, but it means they specialize, and it leaves the artist free to be artistic, I guess you could say. But yeah, definitely, it was a theater tradition that moved on over into Hollywood. Now, of course, people like Lew took it to a level. For those of you who don't know, the real Lew Wasserman negotiated the very first contract for his client, where he got a percentage of what was going on rather than just getting paid. And that set the standard that changed everything. And that was for Jimmy Stewart with Universal, actually. But then they bought Universal. So
now you were talking about, on your screen that you're seeing right now, folks, just to clarify, this is the actual real Lew Wasserman, probably one of the most, probably most famous or infamous Asians in
Swift Lazar and a few other guys were pretty the premier guys. But of course, he was also an administrator and a businessman, and of course, he led MCA and then Universal when they bought it for those many years.
Wow! And always a black suit, and his signature glasses that you saw him wear. He's definitely known for that, and
his famous quote, which is "Don't stand in the spotlight; it'll fade your suit."
I love that. I love that quote.
And then his other one I love. He says, "To err is human; to forgive is not company policy." So
that's great stuff. Now, you've also mentioned in the past too that people working directly under him were kind of known as Lew's boys, and that they kind of took on the same
sure.
Black suit, white tie.
You saw those guys coming down the street, you knew who they worked for because they all emulated the boss.
Wow. Now, the difference between agents and managers, you were going to say before.
Oh, well, the manager might be handling your investments and your stock portfolio and the chain of restaurants you're endorsing and whatever, as opposed to the agent who's dealing with your employer, whether it's an independent producer or a studio or whoever. So, and it could be the same person, but often when you get really big, there's more work there than one person can do competently, and so it's split up.
Gotcha. Okay. That's
because you have to remember the rise of what's called they're called various things, loan out companies. In other words, if I, as Joe Superstar, take a job with MGM to do a movie, I get paid as an individual. But if Joe Superstar Inc., my company, lends me to them for a license fee, then the money goes through that company and it's taxed like corporate income. And the big thing you have to remember about America and taxes, especially those of you overseas, is that individual income is I make the money, I pay the taxes on it, I keep what's left. Company taxes are the company makes money, it deducts all of its expenses and pays the taxes on what's left. So,
gotcha.
There's a very big difference there in how things work. So,
gotcha. Okay, because I always, hear the term manager really associated with like music artists, for example, and I'm guessing that's part of the managers.
Well, yeah. It's a question: is it business manager? Or is it tour manager? I mean,
Sure.
there are a million terms and a million jobs, and it's all what that individual does. Um, the answer is you'll never know unless you read the fine print, and they'll do everything they can to keep you from reading it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly.
And there have been so many cases of one day a star wakes up and they're broke because their manager was a crook, and
so sad. It's really, really sad. And I mean, it's everybody's looking to get theirs. You talk about free agents and that transition period between, being contracted for several films and then moving into an era, post golden age, in which now you have free agent actors who obviously need agents, need people to represent them. So some really fascinating.
Although some of them, a few were very, very good business people and did it themselves. I mentioned to you all several weeks ago this great book about the star system, and I was reading it, and it's very big and very long. And I got to a point where I kind of got tired and switched to other things, but I came back to it in the last few days. And after all the general stuff, the author goes into very specific examples of different people and how they handled or didn't handle the whole star thing. One person who was an amazing business mind, it turns out, was Loretta Young. And she managed her own business and career, and that's why she lasted so long in television and elsewhere, because she wasn't at the whim. You have to remember, that's the book, The Star Machine. You have to remember that a lot of these people, the studio took over their PR and their image and their everything, and they were just kind of stuck with whatever happened. And let's face it, actresses didn't last as long, because as they got older, they couldn't play the glamorous young thing they used to, and maybe they didn't want to play the mother or the whatever. But the smart ones are the people who manage to transcend that and have long careers. Or there's a story in there about an actress some of you may or may not remember, named Deanna Durbin, who was a very young girl who was very sweet but had a voice like an opera star. And she hit the ground running as a big star out of the blue. And for 10 years, she did it like crazy. And then she got bored and said, sorry, I'm done. And bought a farm in France and disappeared, and had enough money from what she'd done that she was just fine. And people didn't do that. They might have got left out, but they didn't actively walk out. But some people did, if they could.
Wow.
And also she talks about, at one point in the book, about the people who probably wouldn't have been stars if it wasn't for World War II. And she mentions among those Abbott and Costello. And she says, they were so wacky. She says, but really, she says, when I was a little girl watching their movies, I didn't like them because I thought Abbott was mean and Lou was stupid. And when they finally left the scene years later, Abbott basically died broke and owing taxes, and Costello died younger and was okay. But that if it wasn't for the crazy tensions of the war and everybody wondering whether they were going to die the next 5 minutes, one way or another, or their loved ones, that something that off the wall, wacky, and so limited in breadth of scope wouldn't have made it. But it did. And they talk about, I'm trying to think of some of the stars they mentioned that were so crazy. The zanies, she calls them. Betty Hutton. Others, that if it wasn't for the war, they probably wouldn't have become stars. And of course, during the war, Hollywood had a problem because the big male stars went off to war. And who are you going to get to fill their place? Either somebody very young and inexperienced, who hopefully is 4F so that they don't get drafted, and or somebody much older or foreign or something. So it was a problem, but they filled it. And of course, the other big thing that the war did was cut off all the revenue that studios used to get from Germany and Italy and all those places where American movies suddenly couldn't go anymore. So anyway, it's a great book, and the profiles of some of the individual people will, some of those lives will astound you, will absolutely astound you. Lana Turner, Errol Flynn. She goes into so many. Frank Morgan, The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
And how when they found their niche as the befuddled old man or the officious jerk or the whatever, that they get called back for that part in every movie. And they made a career out of it. They made a life out of it. And made money. So there you go. Anyhow.
Juliet says she left because she saw what it was doing to her friend Judy Garland.
Sort of, but Judy was a whole other story altogether. Read the book, Juliet. I think you'll really, really enjoy it.
I think so. Greg C., your historical cinematic knowledge is immense and blows my mind. Great detail on so many nuances of the topic.
Thank you, Greg. As I've always said, I am curious. I look into things. I have a good memory, and have a little perspective to make some connections that some people don't make. So that's all. But thank you.
That's cool. That is great. On the topic of agents and managers, what's the difference between the two? I think we went over that. Do they do the same thing for the clients, or do they jobs different in some way? I believe we answered that. It could be the same.
It could be different. It all depends on the instance. And I think we really covered that. So
for sure. Well, my last question is just for fun. What were the most popular foods at the craft services table when our ghost was on the set still? And does he have any fun stories about the food?
Most of it's pretty much the same in the sense that there's a lot of donuts and a lot of bagels and a lot of chips and things. But some of the individual people have their own unique style or their unique ethnic expertise where they'll make something special once in a while. I'm trying to think. We had one on one show that I did where the people in the sound department wrote a whole song about him and all of his food stuff. As far as the stuff they get from various people, there was an outfit in Hollywood that made cheesecakes, and they called them cheeses of Nazareth because they were heaven. So and then oh God, what was that outfit that made all the little muffins? They get specialized, and suddenly they become the go-to one for everybody. But craft service. I have a friend who calls it the fat pill table.
Well, now you have craft services. Then at the side there, you have a Ozempic, so you can kind of,
Oh no! Don't do that, folks. That's bad stuff.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
But anyway, yeah, that is not healthy for children or other human beings, as they used to say back in the '60s about nuclear war. But yeah, it's everything you can find at a 7-Eleven or a dollar store is there, and more. And then occasionally they will, on a certain day of the week, make a bigger deal out of it. And of course, on movies not so much, but on TV shows, you've got catered food for dinner on show day. On a show day, you come in noonish and you rehearse everything once or twice, and then the whole cast and crew go to dinner, and then come back in the evening and bring in the audience and do the show. Yeah.
Did you find that the craft service is available for like a series different from a film?
Oh yeah, sure. Because on the films, usually it's done by the catering company that's also catering the set.
Gotcha.
There's an outfit called Michelson's that is a big one that does a lot of them, and and of course, if a star happens to like a certain thing, by God, it shows up. Everybody talks about Chasen's. Chasen's was originally just a diner, literally in a railroad car, and then became this very famous Hollywood restaurant. And Dave Chasen was famous, although they had all kinds of fancy French food and other things on the menu eventually, for his chili. And supposedly when Elizabeth Taylor was doing Cleopatra over in Italy, they used to ship Jason's chili to her because she liked it. So,
Oh,
the days. And,
well, you know, it's
and then the building that was Jason's eventually got turned into a Whole Foods, but it was famous for these big red leather banquettes. Well, they saved a couple of them, and they're in the food court section of the Whole Foods if you go there now. So a little touch of the old days.
wow, that's something. Okay.
When you go to, I used to go to Jason's fairly often, my family, and there were a couple of tables up front that this one was Jimmy Stewart's table, and this one was Bob Hope's table, and they were pretty much there all the time. Yeah, that was a fun place. Food was good. Food was good. It was not brilliant good, but it was pretty darn good. But not diner food by any chance, except for the chili.
Hey, well, there you go. All right.
Dave was originally an actor and a dancer, and he got into that on the side, and that made his future. Dave and Maud Jason, yeah.
Good stuff.
Old Hollyweird.
Old Hollyweird.
The rest of my day, but yeah, now it's a Whole Foods with a red leather banquette in the food court. Go figure.
Some good stuff. I always saw those craft services tables, and I was like, man, how would what would that be like to have your lunch or your meals in between served for you right there? I got to take care of the talent. That's what they always say.
Well, and of course that was for the crew and the actors. Extras were not supposed to go there, but sometimes they did. And the problem was it was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. A lot of the people, especially a lot of shows I did, involved young people, teenagers. And so they wanted the kids at school. So you got 30 or 40 teenage extras. And unfortunately, they did not have the work ethic, shall we say, of earlier days extras. And when they'd call lunch, well, like at Warner Brothers, there was a Taco Bell across the street, and they'd wind up over there, and maybe they didn't wind up coming back. And I've told the story, I think, before about the problem with extras in North Africa when they were making the first Indiana Jones movie, and that whole scene where he, with the truck and the chase, and they have all of these North African extras, and they're setting up the shot for an hour and a half, and they gave each of them a little wooden cross so that when they got them in a certain pot, they said, write your name on it and put that down, and that's where you stand when we shoot. And it took 2 or 3 hours, and they hit up against what's called a meal penalty, which is you can only work so many hours at a time before you have to pay the crew and the cast extra for going over. So they called lunch, and these guys were so afraid of getting fired for not taking care of it, they all picked up their little cross and walked away. Oh, so 3 hours of setting them in the right spot kind of went out the window at that moment. But tales of old Hollywood, not that old, but anyway.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Good stuff right there. You never know. Oh man, it just.
Well, and then, for example, that scene up on Sala's rooftop retreat there, they had to pay people to take their TV aerials down all across, just to make sure that it didn't, fit out of place as far as the time period. So,
which I think Steven Spielberg has remarked before, maybe even George Lucas. It's like, well, nowadays we could just airbrush all that out, but back in the day, you had to be mindful of those things in order to be period correct. Speaking of food in North Africa with this film set and crew, apparently everybody on the crew except for Steven suffered from
they all got dysentery of some kind.
Dysentery, yeah.
Well, when they say don't drink the water, folks, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Mexico and people say, oh, and they drink bottled water. But if you eat salads, chances are they were rinsed in the local water, and
there you go.
That's such a good idea.
Nope.
But as far as oh God, so many of these movies where things like that would happen. African Queen, everybody got sick because hey, it was Africa.
Really?
If you're careful, you didn't, but otherwise, well. That's showbiz. I did a lyric a million years ago for a musical that we almost got to have happen, and it's a song being sung by a diva, a classic old time actress, and she talks about people say the theater's in my blood. I say there must be some confusion. My blood is in the theater, enough for a transfusion.
That's funny.
Yeah, those were the days.
Ken Reinhard map. Why didn't they use a map painting for the rooftops? You can see right here. This is kind of what we're talking about. It was, what I can find on short notice here. You can kind of see where this scene is. I think they didn't go with a map painting.
It gets time consuming to do some of those mats, and if you can
the camera's also dynamic. It's moving around the shot too.
Right.
So, wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for use there. Like Lou said too, expensive and all that.
And if you happen to miss one, you could always take that one out.
Yep, that's true. But to do all of these rooftops, and you can kind of see the antennas and satellites in the bottom of this photo. Let me go ahead and see if I can pull this banner down.
Somebody's asking about food on the set. Recently, there have been a lot of stories because of the end of the 12-year run of Blue Bloods. They always had that scene around the family table for dinner, and about how can you keep eating, and they all had ways to kind of take a bite but not swallow, and when the old cut, spit it out and start over again. Otherwise you would eat copious quantities.
Yeah, that's no good right there for sure. Let's see here. Bonus fun question from KG. What was LW Ghost's favorite snack when he worked on set?
Well, this reminds me of a totally different experience. There was a great, I guess it's still there, a Mexican restaurant in LA called El Cholo. And they had mariachis going around, and they'd come around and they'd, ask people for suggestions. And they came around to my table one time and they said, "Do you have a particular favorite song, senor?" And I said, "No, what's your favorite song?" They said, "Our favorite song is called Take a Break." I used to try to avoid some of that stuff, but what the hell, the usual things, a bagel, cream cheese, things like that. And then of course at Universal, there's El Cholo. My God, you're so quick.
I'll try to be.
They're famous for their green corn tamales every season, and they're wonderful and marvelous. But
at Universal,
of course, you walk through a gate and you're in the theme park. So there were all those choices if we had a few hours off. Take the escalator up to the top and maybe go to, there was a, what was it called? Victoria Station was a prime rib outfit up there, or barbecue or whatever. If we had the time, I'd go there. But, and the catered meals were not bad at all, actually. But, and if something ever was catered that everybody didn't like, the company found out and it didn't come again at the next time they catered. That's all. It was adjustable. I got to tell you the truth. If you're in the movie business for the food, you're in the wrong business. I was, as some of you know, I also was a rather infamous or famous or whatever food, wine, and travel writer and critic and cookbook ghostwriter and all that sort of thing. So I got my fill on those other things. People said, "Oh God, you get to go to all these great restaurants." And I said, "Yeah, and I get poisoned about twice a year too. So there's the ups and the downs."
Oh, really?
Yeah,
was that frequent?
Oh, well, yeah, to some degree. I remember one terrible, awful bout that I won't bore you all with, but I shouldn't have swallowed that shrimp. I tasted it. I knew it was bad, and I swallowed it anyway to be polite. Oops. Big mistake. Big mistake. But
tough stuff. Goodness.
Yeah, driving the big white bus all night long. There you go.
Well, there you go. I think it's about time to get to your Backlot jukebox, I believe.
Oh, yes. And for those of you who are not familiar with this relatively recent addition to our show, I always love great movie, and in this case, TV, music. And it's very hard with all the rules on YouTube to ever be able to actually play it. But if people have broken that rule or figured out a way around it and have it on their sites, we can link to their links. And we've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. And this one is kind of a different one because it's not a feature film score. It is a medley. It turns out the head of the Cincinnati Orchestra loves old sci-fi TV shows. And so he put together a medley of, it's got both. I don't know if you know, there were two themes for Lost in Space, one for the first two seasons and one for the third season, both written by the then billed as Johnny Williams. And they also did 2 seasons, although they're not in this medley, of Land of the Giants, 2 different themes that he did. But this also has Battlestar Galactica, and it has Doctor Who, and it has all kinds of different shows. See how many you know. And by the way, it's really good, and it's wonderful to hear 100 and some odd piece big orchestra play these songs, although there's also a guy playing a theremin in there, you know, which is this thing that you wave your hand over with wires to make that wee-oo sound. But for whatever reason, this recording is kind of low volume, so turn your volume way the heck up when you listen to this. But it's a lot of fun, and it will remind you of shows you forgot, and I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, that's so cool. You know, one of the first genre guys that you guys ever did when you were covering a specific film was a sci-fi film.
The very first, in fact, was Forbidden Planet, which we found all of the weird alien garden in that movie was actually leftover sets from Munchkinland in The Wizard of Oz. But that just shows you we don't throw anything away in Hollywood. They do what we call fold and hold, which means put it all in a box. We might need it someday.
Right. You're Stanley Kubrick, and you demand everything to be destroyed after 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, because he doesn't want anybody to mess with it. But oh well.
Fantastic. Well, my link to this week's Backlot Jukebox is going to be in the description and in the chat as well. So if you want to go ahead and listen alongside our amazing commentary on all things film, cinema, TV, well then, there you go. You got the links to do it. We also have a super chat from Nutty Squirrel with the $5. Yes. Thank you so much. Lou, do you have any more experience with making movies or TV shows? Which do you enjoy more?
Most of my experience is more with TV than with features, although I've done my share. And also with live documentary kind of TV. You know, TV, it's funny. I've made very, very big features and very, very tiny TV shows and everything in between. And for whatever reason, weekly, episodic, half-hour, multi-camera shows, there is more fear, more flop sweat, more, am I still going to be here next week, than any other kind. And if it made it better, I would understand it, but it doesn't. And that part is kind of a downer. But otherwise, you know, it's nice to know that barring a sudden audience turnaround, if you're on a hit show, that you're going to have 22, 24, 26 weeks of making a show. I had many dolly grips who would come to multi-camera later in their careers. And about the first couple of days, they would look at me and they would say, wait a minute, you mean it isn't 4 a.m. and I'm not up to my butt in cold water at Lake Piru? I'm on a nice warm sound stage with craft service and a simple dolly. And where's this been all my life? So in that sense, because it is a controlled environment, TV is easier. On the other hand, TV has more, I would say, episode to episode pressure. So features are slower, but they're not that much slower in these days, or shouldn't be. And it's all a question of, you know, the old saying of mine is the old thing about the most important part on a car is the nut that holds the wheel. If you have a good producer and a good director, great. If you don't, heaven help you. And I always say I would have been richer and famouser and worked a whole lot more and have a much bigger pension and all the rest of that if I had taken all the jobs that were offered to me. But I knew kind of by reputation who the morons were, and I decided peace of mind was better. And so I turned a lot down. I don't know if that answers your question entirely, but they're definitely different, but they each have their own attractions and detractions.
I never thought about the difference between on location and in soundstage. I mean, that's
it isn't even location so much. I mean, a lot of features happen on stages too. But well, you know, there's a saying in the business: no names on location, because if something happens, they don't want to be able to know who did it or who said it. You say, hey, you and Fred and John, but that's not their real names. So, yeah, but Jan is saying nobody wants to work with an abusive a-hole. Well, nobody wants to, but the woods are full of them.
Yes, yes,
And
indeed.
sometimes you don't know until you get into it where you are. So,
Also, too, you
I
were
can
talking about.
say that after over 300 episodes of network television, aside from all the other things, the features and whatever, there are two that stand out in my mind as bad experiences.
Hmm.
And for different reasons, totally. But that's a pretty good ratio. Most people can't say that. So either I'm lucky or I'm smart or some combination of the two.
You were talking about season pressures or pressures with an episodic series in which I'm guessing the deadlines are tighter and
It's not about deadlines. It's about well, it's partly how the show is formed. If you One of the executive producers, as in head writer, as in creator of a show that I did, and I won't say who and which show, he told me about, like it was an ensemble show. And he said, I got pitched a hilarious script, wonderful comedy, would have been great, but it was an ensemble show about the people working at a branch office of the IRS. Everybody hates the IRS, and I don't care how charming those people are, audiences are not going to want to watch them week in, week out. For novelty, once or twice maybe, but not so much. So there's all those factors at work. You have to think of longevity when you come up with these shows. You have to think of what are you going to do in season 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Right.
Some of you may know the expression "jump the shark," which was when literally in one of the episodes of Happy Days, they had Fonzie surfing and he jumped over a shark. And everybody said, well, they've now totally run out of things to do on that show. And that's what the phrase means, which is it's reached the end of its life. And of course, a lot of very big hit shows, after 6, 7 years, you've got enough for syndication and then some. Because remember, in the old original days of syndication, a show that used to be on once a week on the network for 22, 25, in the old days, 30, 34 episodes, and then rerun in the summer and during Christmas and all that. Suddenly, when it goes to syndication on Channel 13, it's on 5 nights or 6 nights a week, which means you start repeating the episodes, however many you've got in the can, sooner. And so you had to have enough, which was usually about 5 or 6 seasons, maybe 7. But at a certain point, if we got past 8 or 9, there wasn't any point in making any more because it was diminishing returns. In fact, I always tell the story of ER was such a hit that they got to the end of that string and they were ready to say, that was good, let's quit. And the network came to them and upped the fee they were paying to the producers for the show enormously. Why? They wanted to use it as they call a tent pole, because, if you had other shows that were new and you put them after that, they had a better chance of making it. And the producers went around with envelopes to everybody in the crew and just handed out checks. Some of them were rather large checks, and just said, thank you. We're sharing the wealth with you. And of course, if we have to go a little overtime sometime, you won't care, will you? Hell no. Because, people, grips, electricians were getting checks for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand out of the blue. Now they had to pay taxes on it, it's income. But still, that was a smart move on the producer's part. But that doesn't happen very often. That doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, now I have a better understanding of what you meant by pressures. It's
it's everybody looking over their shoulder, wondering if they're gone next, which is crazy. Which is just crazy. On the other hand, for actors, guest stars, I will not mention who, out of privacy's sake, but a very, very well beloved and famous actress, comedic actress, was a guest star on one of the shows we did, and she was great and she was marvelous. And of course, on multi-camera sitcoms where you have an audience, we do curtain calls at the end. We play the theme and everybody comes out and takes a bow. And I'm down there watching, and she came out and she's smiling and she took her bow. And as she finally walked off, her face suddenly became this mask of what I interpreted as, was that the last time?
Oh
Was
man,
that the
that's
last time?
wild.
Because they never know. They never know. And, you know, I mean, actors, relatively speaking, are insecure people anyway. So,
Sure.
and remember, you have to be able to take a lot of rejection, not personally, because, you know, you audition for things. I've mentioned in the past that my mother was an actress in radio, and later in her life, she started doing little bits and commercials and things in television. And she'd get called for an audition, and she'd say, "This is what it says. What do they want? You're the director. What do you think they want?" I said, "First of all, they don't know. And second of all, they'll know it when they see it." Well, that's pretty hard to deal with if you're an actor. You know, there's so many stories of people who tried out for one thing but got something else or changed roles. But oh yes, I did that show once. That was interesting.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure that was very interesting right there.
Well, one thing I remember about that show, you remember the coffee shop that they always went to?
Yes.
This was in the very first couple of shows of the series. And we're doing the show, and the sound man is going nuts because there's this swish, 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 swish noise going on during the scene. And they found out one of the extras was wearing very nylon gym sweats, and every time he moved, it was like swish, swish, you know, because of the cloth. So they had to have him take his pants off and go away. So all those kind of little things happen. I think I told the story of watching a rehearsal for Cheers one time. And Rhea Perlman is upstage at that back table on, if it's looking at it from the camera, on the left side. And she comes out, she does her line, and Jim Burrows, the great director, said, wait, Rhea, come to 4 more steps downstage and then do the line. And she gives the classic actor question of, what's my motivation? And he says, because I can't see you up there. So sometimes, you know, it's about the practical and not about the artistic, and understanding the difference is what pros do, and some pros never get. Another show I did with a very fine actor directing, and his attitude was, don't bother the cast with the whole camera stuff because they should just do their thing and we'll adjust. Well, the star was supposed to kind of end a scene with kind of a Oliver Hardy-esque, well, here's another fine mess you've gotten me into, look at a camera. Well, there's 4 cameras out there. Would the director tell him? No. But after it was done rehearsing, I walked up and said, "See camera." He said, "Thank you." Because he knows where he wants to sell it, if he knows which camera to sell it to. So you have to understand all of that as well.
A little bit of technical coordination there.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah.
Great stuff. You know, I'm a sucker for little trivia bits and whatnot. I actually came across one such particular instance on a famous TV show that we all know. Thank you, Nutty Squirrel, for the super chat, by the way. Here we go. This by Fascinate on X. Mary Tyler Moore accidentally nailed a trick shot in one take in a 1962 episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. The trick shot was actually made in one take. They had planned for a pool expert to make the shot after cutting away from showing her hitting the cue ball, but to everyone's surprise, she actually made the shot.
Well, that's like that clip that, what is it, Pro has in his intro of the news guy throwing it over his shoulder and actually making the basket.
Yes, absolutely.
You know.
You can see the genuine surprise in their faces. So I can't play it, but because I'm sure we'll be got. But here's Dick Van Dyke taking over Mary Tyler Moore to the actual pool table. They have a little banter. She shoots, and you can see Mary Tyler Moore's expression there, not believing that she just actually made that shot. I would recommend anybody to see the actual clip in its totality here. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. You can see it. It's really funny. It's pretty awesome, and you know, just something that the magic of television.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes things happen for the better, sometimes not so much.
Yes, yes, indeed. Let's see right here.
That's why we have a medic on the set, just in case.
Yeah, that's true. Shadow Martin has a couple for us. I remember when Todd Sedgwick, who was part of the cast for Picard, when they had a dinner scene, he actually took a photo of the set of what he was actually eating. It turned out to be beets with lettuce. Power of television, everybody. You can't come up with sci-fi creative dishes all the time.
Well, heck, I mean, look at all that blue and green food served at the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel. That was basically, hey, red dye is your friend.
Yes. Well, I heard it's a funny story associated with that, Lou. I've heard people's post Galactic Star Cruiser bathroom stories were very interesting as well.
I'm sure. I would just say their mouth probably turned an interesting color.
Yes, indeed. Let's see here. Well, I bring
Stan Freberg did a spoof commercial for puffed grass. Mm-hmm. And he said it's great, and you can always tell the people that love it because their mouth is green. So anyway, I think we'll fix a lot of that in the upcoming with RFK's seeking to find us a little healthier way to eat, which is a good thing.
I think so. I
could never figure out why does making it blue make it intergalactic. I mean, is that the color they've got up there? Is all?
Yeah. It was something I never understood quite either, but I think they wanted to have food that was approachable, recognizable, yet different. I think that's what they were going for.
Well, I mean, we could go on forever about how misbegotten that whole experience was.
Yes, that is very true.
And my basic summation of it was, if this is supposed to be the ultimate luxury space cruise, if this is supposed to be the Regent Seven Seas or that level of cruise compared to, let's say, Disney or Carnival or whatever, then shouldn't the rooms be a little more bigger and not be a shoebox with a couple of bunk beds?
Well,
I mean, if you were among the elite of the future, would you buy steerage and call it luxury? I don't think so.
So it's really funny that you say that, Lou, because that was my original point that was made when the rooms were leaked. And it's funny because it's so funny you bring this up. I just discovered this the other day. If you go on the official Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser Wikipedia page and you scroll down to reception, the first sentence is early renderings of the project in 2017 sure that a new hotel would be shaped like Star Wars Starship. And that's description. Reception. Early photos of the Halcyon's small, windowless cabins went viral before the hotel opened to the public, with many commenters on Twitter complaining that they were not a suitable luxury accommodation. Many commenters on Twitter. If you go to the source for that, it takes you to an article out of Dexerto. And Dexerto, if you scroll down in this article, it's referenced by Wikipedia as a source for this information. Well, it's my tweet.
God.
So I was the guy.
You met yourself coming and going, huh?
I guess so. I guess I was one of the guys, or one of the very first guys to say, "Hey, this is not luxury." So, Lou, I fully agree with you. As I'm trying to say here.
I'm one of those. I'm the guy that always asks the "What does God need with a starship?" question. Like I said about this new Superman trailer, where Crypto, the super dog, he tells him, "Take me home," and he drags him across the ice. And I'm going, Crypto can fly. Pick the guy up and fly him there. Don't drag him across the sharp ice. No, nobody thought of that.
Well, maybe James Gunn has a scene of Crypto flying and doing just that. Who knows? I keep hearing weird reports out of that film, by the way. Some saying that test audiences have seen it and not good. Other people are saying it's great. I don't know. I don't know what to believe.
Well, you can't believe my eyes because I'm not rushing out to see it.
Oh, not a fan?
Well, of Superman, yes. Of that incarnation anymore, believing in, you can only lose your reputation once, and they've more than done that with that, Star Wars, all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And the suit looks awful, but it's like Paddington Bear's welly boots, and the stupid little trunk thing, and all the little. It's like, let's see if we can make the suit with all these little, welts and bulges and things to make him look unmuscular instead of all the ones in the past, like the Batman stuff that made him look muscular.
Right.
This is. Anyway, that's just my take. What do I know?
We'll have to see what the box office prospects on this will be come 2025 when this film actually comes out. So there you go. We have one more question. Do you have any favorite memories from the Adventurers Club?
Oh,
I've seen videos and things.
So many. The Adventurers Club was one of the greatest things ever. It really was that good. And you could sit there all night, every night, and it was the same, but it was different because the people were so good. Among many favorite memories, one of the many characters was the French maid. And they had a girl, I don't know if it was a real accent or she was putting it on, but it sounded real. And she was like deep south. And her name was Danelle, or at least her stage name, whatever, for this. And she'd come on, "Hi, y'all. I'm Danelle. I'm the French maid. Yeah, I'm from the south of France." Just blew everybody away. Certainly the various shows and the Mask Room and the radio show and all of the animated things on the walls and Congaloosh, and of course the official swearing-in ceremony of the Adventurers Club with the Colonel, the mannequin up top, and it was a rare and wonderful thing. It really was. And like I say, you could spend all night there and be very happy if you were me. The other things around there were okay. The comedy club was okay. Mannequins, the disco thing was okay if that was what you were into.
Right.
But if you just wanted people who were in character, on point, all night long, and lived it. Boy, what a great, great, great place that was. I will always remember it so fondly indeed.
It's one of those rare instances when something might be too successful, which I think I've heard, at least that's what doomed the Adventurers Club, because when people went in, they didn't leave. They
drank. That's what they were there for.
That's true.
Drinks, and I don't think that it was just the redoing of the whole area that killed it. But there was a talk at a time when they were going to put in kind of a redo on the edge of Animal Kingdom, someplace where they put that restaurant now.
Yeah,
but it never happened. So.
Should revisit that idea. I know.
Well, maybe that's something that just exists in that bubble and will never come again. Sometimes when they try and redo things, they can redo the look. They can copy the sets, but it doesn't mean it'll have the same charm.
Yeah,
and frankly, I look. I don't mean to be hypercritical in comparison and whatever. And nowadays there is no comparison. Mm-hmm. But it always was true in the classic days that the cast members and the feeling and the mood at Disneyland was always superior to Disney World, because you were drawing from Southern California and the industry as opposed to junior college theater kids.
Yeah.
Same as I said that when Magic Kingdom opened, it was twice as much area with half as much stuff painted by Florida house painters as opposed to by studio set painters in California. Right. It was great, but it wasn't the same, and it wasn't drawing on the same people. So the question is, could you find cast and really, really, really hold out for good people to do what they did at the Adventurers Club now? I don't know. I just don't know.
You know, it's interesting. I was just having this discussion with Joshua Harris. I don't think you were there, Lou. I believe you were, about the talent coming from Hollywood for stuff like the character meet and greets and the characters that you actually see in the park, and how they're a little bit more on model, let's say, than the characters that you might meet out in Florida. And I fully believe it has, you know, that is because
Well, if we say that
Disneyland's
culture
proximity to
is
Hollywood.
relevant, then the culture of the location is relevant too. It
Yeah.
just is.
Yep. Absolutely.
If it's
100%
not
agree.
bad, it's just different, then there's no reason to reject it. But well, it's the difference, and we were talking about that too on that show. It's the difference between Fantasmic at Disneyland versus Fantasmic at Hollywood Studios. It's just not the same thing. Never will.
Different show.
If they get the dragon back and everything is working, it still isn't the same thing.
100% agree with that.
Yeah. So.
For sure. Well.
And if you don't know any better because you've only seen the other one and it's great, more power to you. That's not an issue. But anyway.
There is nothing like the Mark Twain gliding past with all those characters out front.
Right.
Waving to you, you know, on Tom Sawyer's Island, this place that you've been basically passing by all day, to see it light up like that, it's just not the same. You can have an amphitheater and a stadium and all that and great seats, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, the repurposing is more powerful than the made from the start for of the other. I agree.
Now, Lou, you have a couple of things that you're working on. I have heard anyway. What do you got coming up for the genre guys?
Oh, well, we made 2 last night. We've been doing kind of double headers a lot because Hangry is going to be wandering off into the world for a couple of weeks. So last night we did talk about a double feature. We did this, in my opinion, awful, terrible movie called Reign of Fire about dragons with great cast, Matthew McConaughey and Gerard Butler and what's his name, Batman, you know,
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale and Alice Krieger in service of nothing, my opinion. But you'll see my opinion when you see the coverage. But then we did The Untouchables, which is so good and so wonderful. And if you watch it again, if you remember it from the old days, you'll see things you didn't see before. That's how many good things are in there to be found. And yet recently, Kevin Costner has said that of all of his movies is the one he has the most regrets about, not because he thinks it's a bad movie, but because he thinks he was too young and too inexperienced to give as good a performance as he could have later in that part. And he talks about how Connery coached him and helped him with that. But gee, it's a great picture. Gosh, it's a great picture.
That's fantastic.
But you remember the set pieces. You remember the thing at the Canadian border, and you remember the scene in the train station. But you don't remember a lot of the smaller, intimate scenes in between until you see it again. And you find out without those set pieces wouldn't be as impressive because you need contrast. You can't be going at 1,000% from moment one to the end of the movie, you know?
Right.
Anyway, it's a pretty special movie. So we did those 2 last night. We're still talking about what we're going to do next week. And we've got obviously others in the can. And as you all know, they are originally member perks for the Pro channel, but then 3 months later, they come here as freebies. What was the most recent one you put up?
The most recent one is still something like a hot. Alvarez Kelly is coming out. It's going to be coming out sometime.
Anybody out there who's never seen Alvarez Kelly, please watch that movie. First of all, it's Bill Holden. You know, you can't beat it. You can't beat it. But it's a movie about the Civil War, but it's about cows. It's, I think on my thumbnail when I did it, I called it All Cattle, No Hat, because it was a picture of Holden and Widmark, both without their hats on. But Alvarez Kelly has this great, back when they used to write theme songs for movies, and it starts with this whole little prelude about all through the history of war, and they show you the Romans and the Greeks and everybody in between. Food matters because you got to feed the troops. And this is all about cattle and who gets them and who's going to feed them to their troops between the Union and the Confederates and Janice Rule, who's lovely, is in it also. And Well, just a fun movie, but that opening theme song about Alvarez Kelly, that ay 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 senor, because he's supposedly from Mexico, but he's Irish, obviously. So, um, anywho, um,
It's a great film. It's I've had a pleasure working on it, and watching the film, grabbing the screenshots, also to listening to the commentary. It's fantastic. So definitely, guys, you definitely want to check this out. It will be either premiering tomorrow or sometime in the week. What's difficult right now is that my role is changing into that Park Place Network as I help out more of the team and become an integral member of the team. So that's the only thing that's pushing some of this stuff back. But trust me, folks, it is coming out. And Lew Westman's Ghosts commentary, along with Lauren Connor and Henry Table, just fantastic.
It's worth waiting for.
Yes. It's a good way to put it. I like that.
I mean, it's not a consequential movie. It's not a movie in the history of the movies. It's just a rollicking good time. That's all.
That's fantastic.
And that's enough compared to some of the bad times we're getting fed nowadays.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I agree. There are some stinkers out there. And I was looking at the 2024 box office and what we just experienced. I'm like, man, there were some bad films coming out. Hopefully 2025.
Well, and as I've mentioned, I get all these screeners, either actual discs or special links that are linked to me. And, oh, God, don't share them. And when you watch the disc, you're supposed to destroy the disc after you've watched it because they're worried about, obviously, pirated stuff. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to destroy some of those discs. Usually after giving them maybe 10, 15 minutes of, nope, not for me. Thank you very much. Yeah, there were a few. I've made my votes, and we'll see what happens, at least for the nominations. I wish I could say that in years of mediocrity, the cream rises to the top, but often for some reason it doesn't, and that's a shame too. But then the awards, like all of our other institutions, are getting less and less relevant, and fewer people are watching them, and fewer people give a damn if you get one or don't. And that's sad. That's sad. I think.
Yes, I do agree. I think it's really sad.
But I'm just a crotchety old guy who remembers the golden era. So what can I say?
Indeed. Well, I think that just about wraps us up right here. I hopefully people enjoyed this presentation of Hollywood Backlot with Lew and you.
If you enjoyed it, tell all your friends. If you didn't, don't tell anyone.
Yes. My name is Figment. This is the Dreamfinder next to me, and we're all just not here.
What about science?
Yes, science. For sure. If you have a question for Lew Wasserman's Ghost, you can go ahead and provide those at t3ponline@yahoo.com. We love answering your questions, so please keep them coming. And if you like this video, please like this video. If you really like this, please share us out, as it helps us out tremendously against the YouTube algorithm. Be sure to subscribe to That Pod Plays if you haven't already. And is there anything you want to lastly say, Lew?
I don't know. Buy the damn discs. Put them in your library. I know it's boring saying that, but wow. When some British agency declared Greek history triggering, that's got to make you scared.
And I'll say this. When you get the DVD player, the Blu-ray player or something, I don't know, either get to or maybe get the extended warranty, because, that's... I was listening to somebody and they were like, look, physical media is great, but if the players, are out of production, that's a big problem.
Yeah,
so
there's that.
For sure. Thank you so much, guys. We will see you all next time on Hollywood Backlot with Lew and you. Take care.
Thanks a lot.